The timpani, also known as kettle drums, are the most commonly used percussion instrument in the orchestra. A descendant of the nakers, which were commonly carried to be utilized in battle, the timpani made their way into the opera hall in the early 17th century. A timpano, the singular form of the Italian word timpani, is characterized by a single head stretched over a hemispherical bowl. Timpani are typically used in sets that can be tuned to various pitches. The sizes of the timpani have become somewhat standardized over the years. A typical set now consists of 4 or 5 drums with the largest bowl 32 inches in diameter. The drums each get 3 inches smaller from there, 29 inches, 26 inches, 23 inches, and if a 5th drum is included, 20 inches. Each drum is commonly referenced to by its size. I might say something like, "Be careful where you're hitting the 32," or "For this piece you only need the 26 and the 29. This allows us to communicate with each other effectively and pinpoint problems specific to a particular drum. Take a moment now to internalize the sizes and names of the drums. This will help you keep up when I'm talking about particular drums throughout the next few lessons. As you can probably guess, timpani are expensive. It's common for a school music program to purchase a set of timpani over the course of a few years. If this is the case, I would recommend purchasing a 26 and 29 inch pair first. These are the two timpani that are most commonly used, especially in beginning level band and orchestra literature. The next most useful drums are the 32 and then the 23. The 20-inch drum is generally only used in advanced literature or timpani solos. Having a 20 is helpful for a large, well-established band program, but it's probably not necessary for most high schools. You definitely won't need one at a middle school. Let's talk now about the construction of the drum. You will see that there are a number of commonalities between the construction of the timpani and the snare drum. Transfer the information that you know about the snare drum into this discussion. I have 2 timpani here today that are each part of a separate set. You can probably see that they're constructed somewhat differently. Before we get into those details, I want to talk about the parts that are similar. On both drums, we have bowls that are made of copper. The bowl is the part of the drum that most affects the tone, and copper bowls are the professional standard. The other option for bowl material is fiberglass. These drums are significantly lighter and cheaper than drums with copper bowls. The tone of these instruments is adequate, but when the sound is put up against copper, it just does not compare. If there's any way that you can afford it, try to purchase copper drums. Fiberglass makes a decent alternative if copper isn't an option. I recommend the use of plastic heads on the timpani in a school band program. Many of the world's best timpanists use calf heads, but it definitely won't be worth your time or money if you're teaching at a school. Just go with plastic. When purchasing timpani heads, one thing to be aware of is that the size of the heads will not match the size of the bowl. This is because most modern drums have what we call an extended collar. The collar is the space between the counter hoop and the bearing edge. On many drums, the collar is 1 inch all the way around. This means that the diameter of the heads will be 2 inches larger than the size of each bowl. Therefore, on a 32-inch drum, you will actually need to purchase a 34-inch head. That being said, each manufacturer has their own specifications for collar size. Your best bet is to call a nationally recognized percussion specialty shop so that they can help you determine which size heads are right for your drums. Just as with the snare drum, the head is held down by the counter hoop, which is secured by the tuning rods or lugs. The lugs are each threaded into the tuning mechanism. Here's where our 2 drums begin to differ. On my right, we have a balanced action tuning mechanism. On the left, we have a ratchet-style tuning mechanism. Let me first talk about the balanced action drum. This is the type of drum that you are far more likely to encounter in your teaching. On a balanced action drum, the tension of the head is balanced against the tension of the spring located beneath the drum. Both the tension of the head and the tension of the spring can be adjusted to keep them in balance with each other. I will talk about when and how to make these adjustments later in this lesson. When the heel of the pedal is pushed downward, notice how this group of rods, sometimes called the spider, is raised. This, in turn, raises the rods that are attached to the housing where the lugs are inserted. All of these moving parts work together, resulting in the lifting of the counterhoop as the pedal is moved downward. A higher counterhoop means a looser head and a lower pitch. The opposite reaction happens when the toe of the pedal is pressed. The spider moves downward, pulling the rods and counterhoop down, tightening the head. One other part of the tuning mechanism on most balanced action drums is the tuning gauge. This extra rod protruding from the spider goes to the gauge on the side of the drum. The needle on the gauge moves with the pedal, giving a reference of where the pedal is within its range. I will talk more about the benefits and the problems with timpani gauges in the next lesson on tuning. For all of this complexity, the operation of balanced action drums is simple. You move the pedal wherever you'd like within the range, the pitch changes, and it stays in place as you remove your foot. If you have the opportunity to make a timpani purchase for your music program, I would recommend acquiring balanced action drums with copper bowls and gauges. Just so you can see what an alternative style of timpani tuning mechanism is, I'd like to briefly show you the Ratchet-Type drum. You may even encounter this type of tuning mechanism in older timpani at a school. Most major professional timpanists will utilize Ratchet-Type drums because they offer a few advantages over balanced action drums. First and foremost is their pitch stability. Ratchet-Type drums have pedals with a clutch. The clutch must be disengaged before moving the pedal and re-engaged before the foot is removed. This adds a layer of complexity to the tuning process, but avoids problems with pitch slipping that can occur on balanced action drums. Secondly, these drums include a fine tuner. The fine tuner is usually a knob or handle that can be turned by hand to zero in on the desired pitch. This can be very beneficial when extremely precise pitch is necessary. Most young students do not have the ear training to hear these very precise pitch adjustments, so the ease of use and affordability of balanced action drums is preferred. Let's briefly see how the Ratchet-Type tuning mechanism works. Starting at the top, you will see that these lugs are much longer. This eliminates a number of the moving parts involved with the balanced action system. These lugs are screwed directly into the spider. The spider is then attached to a rocker arm, which is moved by the pedal through a series of rods. Here's a shot of the clutch and ratchet mechanism. The gauge on this drum works similarly to the one on the balanced action drum, but is connected directly to the pedal instead of through the spider. It is important for you to take some time to get to know the drums in your program that you will be teaching on. Each model is constructed slightly differently, but they have most of the same parts. The more familiar you are with your drums, the better you will be able to help your students succeed on this unique instrument. Also, the maintenance of timpani is impossible without a basic understanding of the mechanics of the drums. Before we get into actually tuning and hitting the drums, we do need to know what the range of each drum is. This information will help you determine which drums to use for which pitches in a particular piece of music. I can't tell you how many times I've had a student come to me asking, which drums am I supposed to use? This question arises from a lack of knowledge about ranges. As you may guess, the range of each timpano is determined by the size of the bowl. Larger drums will have a lower range than smaller drums. Each timpani manufacturer has a slightly different method of construction for their drums, which will also affect the ranges. Today, I'm going to give you what I call the standard usable range. Most timpani will be able to tune a little bit higher and a little bit lower than this range, but this information will at least give you and your students a good starting point. With that caveat in mind, the lowest note on the 32-inch drum is D2. Moving from low to high, the low notes on the other drums are F2, B flat 2, D3, and F3. The easiest way to remember these pitches is that they form a B flat major triad. From here, we can determine the highest notes on each drum by moving up a perfect fifth. This puts the top notes at A, C, F, A, and C. Take a moment to look at these ranges notated on the staff. Two things to notice. First, the range of a whole set of drums encompasses almost 2 octaves, and none of these pitches need to be written in treble clef. If you are writing a timpani part and you're moving into treble clef, you're probably writing outside the range of the drums. Second, there's significant overlap between the individual drums. Sometimes you will even be able to tune a single note on 3 different drums. So, what do you do if your timpani can't hold all of the pitches within the standard usable range? This is a very common problem, especially when drums haven't been serviced in a while or the heads are old. The interval at which you will need to change your timpani heads depends on use. If you are using your timpani outside for marching band, and 10 students are playing timpani solos in the spring, you will need to change the heads every 1 to 2 years. If the drums generally stay in one place and you really only use them for concert band, you may be able to wait 4 or 5 years before changing the heads. If the drums seem to regularly move out of range, it's probably time to change the heads. Now, if your balanced action timpani are out of range or the pedal is slipping at its highest or lowest points, there are a few simple adjustments we can make to get them back in playing shape. First, you need to check the sizes of your drums. If you have a non-standard set, you don't want to tune them to the standard ranges. Even if you do have standard size drums, you should check the manufacturer's recommended ranges. Like I mentioned earlier, the ranges used by each manufacturer differ slightly from one another. If you can't find the manufacturer's recommended ranges, feel free to use the usable ranges that I have listed. Now, move your pedal to its lowest position with your heel to the floor. If the pedal doesn't stay there on its own, hold it down with your foot while using an electronic tuner and your ears to check the pitch. Adjust the lugs with a timpani drum key to move the head to the correct pitch. Timpani keys are different than regular drum keys. Make sure that you have a few on hand that fit your particular drums. When adjusting the head with a key, make small adjustments using 1/8 turns, adjusting all of the lugs the same amount. Turning one lug and then the one directly across the drum will keep the head from stretching unnaturally while adjusting. Once the lowest note is correct, push the pedal with your toe, moving the drum to its highest pitch. Here you can check the top note to be sure that you are close to the usable range. If the high note is a half step or 2 higher than expected, that's okay. Now that the head is in tune, we can adjust the spring tension. This adjustment is needed when the pedal does not remain in place throughout the full range of the drum. This occurs on balanced action drums when the tension of the head is not balanced with the tension of the spring. On many drums, there is an adjustment knob located directly beneath the bowl. If your drum doesn't have a knob, check under the heel of the pedal for a lug that fits your timpani key. Usually, the pedal will hold at one end, but not the other. If the pedal doesn't hold at the bottom of the range, loosen the spring tension. If the pedal doesn't hold at the top of the range, tighten the spring tension. No matter which way you are adjusting, turn the knob no more than 1 rotation before checking the pedal again. Be careful when adjusting, as the screw can be loosened all the way off. This can possibly damage the tuning mechanism. The safest thing to do is to keep your foot on the pedal while adjusting. Some of this probably seems complicated or unnecessary to you right now, but believe me when I say that you will be glad to have this information when you are out in your rehearsal room wondering why your students can't find the correct pitches on the timpani. You will be amazed at how much better your students will sound on drums that are properly maintained and in range. Most timpani music you will encounter utilizes at least 2 pitches. Because of the limited but overlapping ranges of the drums, it can sometimes be difficult to determine which drums to use for each pitch. Let me give you a few rules to help you determine which pitch to place on which drum. Number 1, stay within the usable ranges of each drum. Every so often, you may need to go a half or whole step above the standard range. This is acceptable for certain situations, although it may require a slight tightening of the head with a drum key before using the pedal to tune. Caution must be taken when making these kinds of adjustments. Number 2, try to place pitches on drums that are adjacent to each other. Skipping drums is sometimes necessary, but should be avoided if possible. If a middle drum is not needed for an entire piece, feel free to remove it so that others are easier to reach. Number 3, the lower you go in the usable range, the floppier the head gets. This causes a loss of articulation. You may see an improvement to the quality of your rolls, but it will be difficult to keep a nice tone when playing loudly. Number 4, if you're looking for a crisp sound or have a lot of faster notes, using the upper ranges of the drums will help. Number 5, sometimes there just aren't too many options. You may have to just place the 4 notes that you need on the 4 drums that you have. And finally, number 6, like always, let your ears be your guide. If it sounds good and you aren't hurting the instrument, it doesn't matter where each pitch is. The sound is always the final test. Accompanying this lesson, I've included a worksheet for you to practice determining which drums you should use in a particular situation. Try to work through each scenario using the tips that I just talked through. It will help if you keep the ranges of the drums in front of you. As you are going through the worksheet, you may find multiple answers to some of the questions. That's okay. If you can, tune up your answers on a set of drums. There you will be able to hear the difference in tone and articulation when identical pitches are placed on different drums. Good luck!